Hello and welcome to the Quiet Light Podcast again. This is Pat Yates sitting in for Joe Valley. I'm super excited to have my man Brad Wayland on today. If you don't know Brad Wayland, he is an exceptionally good advisor at Quiet Light, one of the guys that I met with first when I was starting the process of joining in, because he happens to be from Bowling Green, Kentucky, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. Interestingly enough, is a Western Kentucky guy who my whole family pretty much is. My mother and father graduated from Western Kentucky and Bowling Green. I actually had the ability to walk across the graduation line. So I feel like I'm a pseudo graduate when my mom was pregnant with me a long time ago. My three sons all graduated from Western Kentucky. So Bowling Green is an amazing city that's very close to our heart. So great to have Brad on today. One of the reasons that I want to do these spotlights on the advisors at Quiet Light is for the listeners out there to understand the person behind who's working your M&A. I think that Brad has such an incredible background in business, not only building companies, but starting out in a cubicle, working a job and having the perspective to go in and become an advisor at Quiet Light, to work and sell his company through private equity after building it from scratch, basically. Just an incredible amount of information. He has so much knowledge about deals, doing over 50 deals at Quiet Light, some of the biggest ones we've ever done. And he's sort of a walking commercial for what we do at Quiet Light. He is now a managing advisor, of which Amanda Rabb and Chuck Mullins also are, that help guide our team at Quiet Light. But he has so much experience, done such a good job. If you're looking to work with someone at Quiet Light, just about anyone is good, but Brad is towards the top of that list of anyone that sold companies in the past. I'm super excited for you to get to know him a little bit and hear about his background, his family, and what he likes. So I'm anxious to get right to it. So let's go to Brad Wayland on an advisor spotlight. And if you need to reach out to me anytime, you can always reach out to Pat at quietlight.com or check out our listings on quietlight.com. This is exciting. We got Brad Wayland, an exceptional advisor at Quiet Light. Let's get right to it. Brad, it's great to have you on the Quiet Light podcast today. How you doing?
Great. How are you, Pat?
I'm awesome, man. I'm really looking forward to this. So the people out there listening and riding your car or watching on video, whichever one you are, one of the things about Quiet Light that's so amazing is we have some really unbelievable entrepreneurs that are, advisors here that have so much experience. And obviously, Brad, you're way at the top of that list as one of the main guys that has been at Quiet Light for a long time. And I wanted today just to profile you and your background, but maybe introduce yourself to the listeners if they don't already know Brad Wayland, and give them a little information about you and where you're from.
Great. Thank you, Pat. Yes, I'm Brad Wayland. I have been at Quiet Light for the last 6 years. I live in Bowling Green, Kentucky, about 50 miles north of Nashville, Tennessee.
Kentucky, yes.
And Pat lives in Kentucky, about 90 minutes north of me. So a beautiful country out here. Didn't plan on living in Kentucky. That was not really in the cards. I'm a Kansas City boy. I'm an avid Chiefs fan, season ticket holder. I always thought I would go back to the city and kind of live there, and got a finance degree that I wrapped up at Western Kentucky University. And instead of going into financial planning, which was always kind of my plan, I ended up doing a corporate accounting gig. And about 3 months in, I felt like, man, I'm going to get fired from this job. Like, I felt like I literally would walk to the cube and I would pretend in my mind like I was opening the jail cell. And it was 10 hours a day of sales and use tax and balance and GL accounts. Some of the best accounting experience for me. But after about 3 months, I was like, I got to get out of here. And I had a couple of friends that had gone into the t-shirt business, and they had 6 employees, and they just started selling t-shirts to fraternities and sororities and other clubs and groups. And I had a job offer from Edward Jones. I was going to take it. And they said, hey, what do you think about coming over and running business development for us?
Wow. And
so I came over, and within about 6 months, I became enamored with the idea of selling t-shirts on the web. They had launched a website. They had a firm in town that had built this site for them where they could get leads. And I thought, this is really interesting that people from all over the country are ordering t-shirts. And so I started looking at it, and I became very enamored very quickly with search engines. And so, those 2 friends of mine didn't give me much of a plan. They basically just offered me a pretty meager salary and some promise for future growth, and said, hey, if you can come in here and figure out how to grow this business from, they just crossed $1 million in sales, then, we can pay you well if you can figure it out, but we're busy with other things. And so, you'll be kind of on your own. So I sat in an office for a good too long period of time trying to figure out search. I wanted to learn how to rank in search engines. Started going to search conferences. I didn't really have anybody in the Bowling Green area that was into tech at all of any sort.
It's not a hub of tech in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Besides my friend Sean. But other than that, I mean, there just wasn't a lot of people here that were kind of into it. And so I kind of went down that rabbit hole, and there's a lot of failure in there. I actually kind of failed at the search thing for multiple years, to the point where, I think even those guys that brought me on thought, does this guy have any idea what he's doing? Like, I didn't have any real results from what I had worked on, but it was a big learning curve. And so we launched a new site in 2007. That was 2004. In 2007, we launched a site that we'd spent a year and a half on, that I built from the ground up to rank in search engines. And then the firm that we were partnered with had built a really cutting edge interactive tool in Flash at the time.
Right.
And we launched it. And actually, by the day we launched it, I thought, are we ever going to make a single dollar selling t-shirts on this website? Like, I really thought, how are we going to actually get people to use it?
Right.
And woke up the next morning to the phone ringing off the hook. And Gizmodo, the tech blog, had found the site and wrote an article that said, Blue Cotton creates Adobe Photoshop-like interface for creating custom t-shirts.
Incredible.
And there was no social media at the time. This is like just right before those were coming on the scene. Site crashed. We got thousands of links to the site, and all that work I had done to build it to rank started to come to fruition. And we went from ranking for one phrase, Blue Cotton, to ranking for over 16,000 phrases about 60 days later.
God.
And that sent us on a whirlwind. And then about 30 days after that, Adobe.com linked to the site. They had a program at the time called the Site of the Day. It was a PageRank 7 of 10, which PageRank is a logarithmic scale. Not that anybody wants to know, but I'm sorry, a PageRank 9 of 10. A 9 of 10 is worth like 1,000,000,001 PageRank links.
Yeah.
So we got this one super, relevant link, and that is where my career sort of took off. They partnered up with me very quickly. We did an equity exchange. I had some other e-commerce businesses that I had to do some creative sales and stuff to get in. We took that business from 6 employees to 130 employees. We went on a multi-million-dollar run up to where we were buying warehouses. We bought a 110,000 square foot warehouse at the end of that. We were producing massive piles of custom t-shirts every day. And I had done it. A lot of that work was done on search to start with. And so that gave me some pedigree inside the walls of that company, got me into ownership. And then I kind of got tired of the factory component. We started to be more about producing the shirts and trying to do production for other e-commerce players than we were about e-commerce ourselves. I was the only guy in the building that was really interested in e-commerce. We had 130 employees. And so I was kind of a one-man show. And so I took my one-man show and started buying content. So I did 26 acquisitions, rolled up a portfolio of content sites, thought it was pretty cool, started to get pretty overwhelmed by the work, exited to private equity in 2015, and then found Mark Dowse kind of found me. We were both speaking at a conference in New York, went to dinner together, and he said, "Hey, you got to think about coming on at Quiet Light." And honestly, my response to him was, "Hey man, if all my other opportunities in the world dry up, maybe I'll consider." And Mark was like,
"You're in the mix, but you're way down the list." Is pretty much how you started it, I'd say.
But Mark was like, "Let me send you some information about Quiet Light." And I was like, "Okay, send me some information." So he kind of slowly lured me in through that. But honestly, it's been a great joy to be at Quiet Light. I think I'm 57 deals in here. I've been here 6 years. I recently was named a managing director. So I work on the executive team, doing some things for other advisors, helping them with their deals and trying to give them the support they need. And I've really enjoyed my time here because I think Quiet Light kind of represents, we're in an industry with a lot of slick, shady salesmen.
Yeah.
I always tell people hey, our competition's kind of like watching Boiler Room. That's like my best, like,
Yeah.
way that I kind of feel like a lot of the people that we compete with are like. And Quiet Light's not like that. We're really more of like, it is a team of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And these entrepreneurs have an immense amount of knowledge about how things work. Actually, Pat, not to brag on you, but Pat just sent me 7 pairs of Happy Feet Kansas City Chiefs slippers last week for my whole family.
That's right.
And we all put them on. And what's great about it is like my boys are putting them on and like, this is amazing. And I'm like, hey, let me show you something. You know what I pulled up? I pulled up Happy Feet Pat on Shark Tank doing his pitch for the Sharks and did a deal with Robert. Like, are you in business with Robert today?
Yes. Yes. Of course.
I never even realized that. For some reason, I thought like a lot of people I hear, they like get a deal and then they don't do the deal for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And it's like Robert tells you tried to give him a pair of penguin slippers, which he was kind of offended by. Like you gave the shark,
really offended by it.
You gave the shark to Mr. Wonderful. You gave the penguin to Robert, and Robert was offended, and he was like, "I'm out." And then the next thing we know, Mr. Wonderful's trying to work one of his crazy royalty guaranteed deals, and you were smart enough not to take it. And then Robert's like, "I'll do that deal," and you said, "Done."
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Brad, because I've talked about this a lot on podcasts, and mine, people don't realize I was in there taping really about 75 minutes, and it's cut to 8. So if people can imagine, 10% of the conversation gets on air. And it was going really horribly for a long time. So it did turn out good.
You know what's interesting about that though is like my kids. So I've got 5 boys. They're 16, almost 17. They're 16, 15, 12, almost 13, 9, almost 10, and then 7. And you put those Happy Feet slippers on, and then you put you on TV. They've seen Shark Tank, and they're like, "How do you know this guy?" And I'm like, "I work with this guy." You work with him? Like, what do you mean you work with him? He works at Quiet Light. He's one of the advisors at Quiet Light. They're like, oh man, their friends are coming over in the afternoon. They're like, my dad works with the guy that created, he's on Shark Tank. You want to watch his episode? So that's a really cool testament to you, but also that sort of summarizes a little bit about the team. Like I heard a lot. I'll just be honest with you. Like I got the emails when I came on at Quiet Light, and people were always talking about, man, I'm so honored to be on this team. I'm so honored to be on this team. And I will tell you, it took me several years to appreciate what we have here in terms of the people that we work with. Right. And so it's just something I've been, I'm kind of ashamed that it's taken me so long to realize it. But at the same time, like I just am so impressed with what people do. Now when I send emails out to the team and I'm like, hey, I got a deal. I'm having this problem here. Does anybody have any advice? I'm getting advice from in the trenches from people that have got an immense amount of experience. And so, when I look at as I talk to people about what I do, I do have a lot of experience in content and e-commerce, but when I talk to people, I always go back to my journey, and I just tell them like, hey, like it had some ups and downs. I definitely have my fair share of failure. I don't try to pitch it as the most glamorous, show on earth. And I feel like that really resonates with the people that are going to come to us and sell their business. And I think that the buyers like it as well, because the buyers start to see like, hey, we're getting a bit of a curated list. If these advisors at Quiet Light think that a business is worth selling, then they're kind of a little bit saying, hey, this is a business that somebody could do something with, which is better than they'll get on the marketplaces where it's just kind of like, hey, list whatever you want. You can just kind of throw something out there.
I think you make a great point, Brad, and not to go off on the same tangent, but I didn't realize it either. When I first came into Quiet Light, I heard about everyone that was there. I had a chance, you and I had a chance last year before Derby, and I think it was 2022. We got a chance to play golf and talk about how you had gone through this crazy time where you were so busy, then you took a hiatus. And what I learned from you talking about that was really amazing. I think that's the one underrated thing about Quiet Light. I think that people don't realize how the entrepreneurship approach to it makes us differential to things that have happened in the past, like the strife that you went through in your shirt business helped you understand something to go forward. So maybe talk to the listeners a little bit about your philosophy on when a business might be ready, or if they're ready, or what kind of timeline it takes to make a business really successful in a sale with you, Brad.
Yeah. I do love to talk about this because I will tell you, and no one wants to sell when everything's great. And that's basically when you need to sell if you're of the mind of selling. And so it's so funny because people come to us, generally speaking, people come to us when something has happened. They, figured out that something's not working as well. The growth's run out. That's a very common thing for people to come to us. And so, in a talk that I think you saw me talk recently, I did this whole segment on kind of the do's and don'ts of when to list your business. And I did that comparison from DirecTV commercials where you got Rob Lowe came on and he's like, "Hi, I'm Rob Lowe." Rob Lowe is this super good looking guy. And he's got this great personality. People loved him on Parks and Rec and these different things. And then it's like, "I'm Rob Lowe and I have DirecTV." And then they bring on this other version of Rob Lowe. And he's like super ugly. And it was the one that I chose for the talk that I did was painfully awkward Rob Lowe. Yes. And he's just like this super and he goes into the bathroom to go to go. And he's like, the real Rob Lowe's like, "Fact, DirecTV has all these channels and all this stuff." And then the painfully awkward Rob Lowe is like, "Fact, it's hard for me to go if people are in the room with me." And he's like at the toilet, he can't go. Like he's basically like comparing these things of like, and I think that's so much like how the businesses are. People come to us and they look like, "Hey, I'm ready to sell. Oh, so what's going on? I just haven't had time to market it the last few months. And so sales have dropped off a bunch, but like, hey, it was really good. How can we sell it?" And so what we're trying to get people to do is understand like, look, we're not here to push you to sell. We have no desire to right. Timing of a sale is your choice. I always tell people, I'm not here to push you to sell. I'll make a recommendation. If I become close with you, I'll hit you over the head with it too. I'll call you and say, "Hey, you're waiting too long. If you want to sell, we need to get it going." I'm willing to say the tough thing, but it's hard to get people to sell because it's a little bit of a counter. It's sort of like investing in the stock market. At the point when no one wants to sell Tesla stock, when a point where no one wants to sell it, and it's just all-time high after all-time high after all-time high, that's the point you're supposed to be selling. Right. But what is happening is before we get to the realization that we're supposed to be selling, everybody's buying heavily, heavily, heavily. But it was the same way with these internet businesses. In 2021, we saw multiples skyrocket. We couldn't keep anything listed. Every single advisor was putting stuff out there and it was selling for higher multiples than we were listing it for. It was doing all these things. And so when you're thinking about philosophically, what's the mindset of how I want to sell? It's a little more of, you have to think a little bit backwards. First, you have to decide, is selling important to me? If you tell me, like, "Pat, you've got Happy Feet. That's a business you still operate today." If you tell me, "Brad, Happy Feet's a cash flow machine for me. I don't have any interest in selling it. I want to keep it. I want to pass it down to my kids. I want to do," that's fine. That's what you've decided to do. That's great. And you know what? You can probably have a business that makes money from now until the day you die if you're willing to keep working at it and doing it. But I think that if people are of the mindset of like, "No, I do think I want to sell. I want to sell because I'm tired of this business. I want to sell because I've got other things I want to do with my life. I want to sell because I got other businesses I want to run." If that's the mindset, then what we have to do is we have to start trying to build the business to sell. And we got to sell before we get tired or before the growth runs out. So much of the time we see entrepreneurs looking at this. I do this all the time. I talk to people on the phone and they're at this mark on the chart. It's going straight up. And they're like, "Well, I mean, why would I sell right now? Things are going so well." And my first thing out of my mouth is like, look, if selling is important to you, you don't have to sell today, but you can't wait for that growth to be gone.
Yeah.
Because as soon as if you get to the peak and you're like, "I timed it perfect. This was my best all-time high. I think next month it'll probably fall off some." And you reach out to Brad or Pat or whoever.
Yeah.
What's going to happen when it gets under diligence? The buyers are going to be looking at it. You said you wanted to list at the peak. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, it's like, "Hey, how's September going?" "Oh, well, our results are a little bit off." That's a deal that's a prime candidate to fall apart.
Yeah.
So selling into the growth is such a great, thing to do. And timing's hard to get right. But I think that, my philosophy on it is like, you want to sell when you don't feel like selling, if selling's important to you.
It's interesting, Brad, because I think that you're hitting on something that's really important for entrepreneurs. I think a lot of sellers might have an apprehension of reaching out if their business, say, is barely growing or is steady or maybe had a down month and had several up. I really feel like with my clients, I like them to come months and months before they think about selling so we can help with the prep. Is there a time that you think it's important for someone to start contacting you if they're thinking about doing it? Let's say they want to do it in the next year. Will there be actionable stuff throughout the year that maybe they change their mind or the market changes or you find a buyer that's in their vertical? Tell us a little bit about how the buyers would need to approach that with you.
Yeah, when people come through, I mean, I would say my preference is to talk to people as soon as possible. Like if selling into, and I do have that. I get people reaching out all the time and say, "Hey, I'm looking to sell in a couple of years. I want to make a plan." That's a certain type of personality that they kind of begin with the end in mind, the Stephen Covey kind of thing. Like there's a personality that comes through that I think is of that mindset. But I would tell you, and also to kind of go back to my previous point, I'm not trying to say that a business that has flat or down trends doesn't sell. I'm seeing businesses with downtrends right now all the time that I'm listing for sale. And so it's not so much about that. It's about if you want maximum outcome, then you want to sell into the growth. Everything is sellable at the right price. It's all a pricing game. And so in terms of when people come to me, I look at it as like every time I get on a valuation call, I say the same thing. I tell people, I'm like, hey, I just want you to know whether you ever want to sell with me or not, I just want you to know my door's always open. I'm always here to talk. We give out free advice all day long. That's what we do at Quiet Light. We're here to talk. There is no strings attached. There is no, hey, you've had 4 phone calls with me, so if you're not going to list now, we're going to have to dial this back. I've had people that have talked to me month after month, every quarter after quarter, year after year, and they never list with me and they go sell somewhere else. It's totally fine. Because what we're trying to do is just establish ourselves as a trusted authority to give you another set of eyes on your business and give you the right kind of exit planning advice so that you can be prepared for the sale. So to your question of like, what's ideal? I mean, there's nothing I love more than a seller that gets to me and is like, hey, I've got a business and I'm like, hey, this looks sellable. And they're like, I'm ready to go right now. That's great. But if you are listening to this and you're thinking like, hey, it's something that I want to do a year down the road. It's something that I want to do 2 years down the road. I don't even know if I want to do it. I want to talk to somebody about whether or not I want to do it. I want someone to help me think through the process and whether or not this is something I want to do or whether I want to hold on to it. These are all things that Quiet Light Advisors can help you with. And we do it free of charge because we make our money on fees generated when we sell your business. And so that's, if we sell your business, we engage, that's when we would get paid, and we wouldn't get paid unless you got paid.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think some things people, whenever they look at, selling something like this, they may look at the fee and think it's a lot. And sometimes you got to look at what goes into that and how much deep knowledge you have. One of the things I'm curious for your comments on is as people are out there deciding if they're deciding between M&A firms. One of the things I believe at Quiet Light that we have that's so great is a trust from buyers. We have an incredible buyer list that understands the kind of docs we put out. You're one of the guys at the forefront of that when Quiet Light was really growing. Tell us about how our approach to being entrepreneur-centric can help the buyers have more confidence too, because I feel like that's really big as to why people will buy from us based on our docs, our research, and our understanding of those businesses.
I actually just got off a call with some guys that are buyers that wanted to do a call with me to just kind of understand kind of my perspective and things like that. And we do quite a bit of that here at Quiet Light. But those guys were doing cold outreach, looking for things to buy. And they said, like, what do you think about cold outreach? And I was like, well, it's interesting you say that. I did a lot of cold outreach. In my buying days, I was buying in one category. So going to the Quiet Lights of the world and looking for their listings, they likely wouldn't have anything in the category I was looking for at any given time. And so I would go and search and do cold outreach to people that were like in the industry, trying to find people to buy. But what's interesting about that is, like, as we were talking through it, this is a new theme for me, but we've seen an influx of marketplaces come online in our industry. So these are just places where you can go shop things for sale, and they've come online and people can just look at it. There's no personal touch to it. It's not a white glove service like Quiet Light. It's like, hey, here's a business for sale. Here's what the person says the business is. Here's what the person says the business earns. Do you want to buy it? You can say yes or no, that's kind of the approach. With Quiet Light, you do get a little bit of a curated approach because Quiet Light advisors are paid based on fees generated by sellers. So just think about the economic principle here. The incentives for Quiet Light advisors to list things that won't sell, where is that incentive?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. If I list something that's not going to sell, I've created a lot of headache for a lot of people. I've created a massive amount of time for myself. I've created a seller that thinks, well, Quiet Light doesn't know what they're doing. They told me they would try to sell my business. They didn't sell it. So I've got a seller that doesn't like the outcome. And then we've got buyers that are like, why are you listing stuff that's not sellable? Like, this isn't a very good business. So it hurts us from all those standpoints. So I feel like for buyers, one of the advantages that they get with Quiet Light is we're not guaranteeing anything. We definitely want you to do your diligence on all the businesses. But when you come through as a buyer, when you see a listing, what that listing says is that some advisor, which all the advisors at Quiet Light are seasoned entrepreneurs, they all have bought, built, sold, operated businesses online. They have an immense amount of experience. They speak a very technical language when it comes to how business is done online. And when you come to that, you're seeing every single listing you see is a listing where an advisor has said, hey, I think this could generate fees for Quiet Light. So I'm going to take the time. I'm going to prepare this for sale. I'm going to put a 20 to 30 page packet out there. I'm going to spend an immense amount of time on the phone and over email with people. I'm going to spend an immense amount of time on the phone and on email with my seller. And so when you're coming as a buyer, you're seeing a curated list. It doesn't mean that every business is great, but what it does mean is we put our eyes on it. We've gotten deep into it, and we think that somebody is going to be interested in buying it. And so that's giving you some assurance as a buyer of like, hey, why is this thing listed? Why is it out there? Somebody over at Quiet Light thinks this is something that would be worthwhile for some buyer on their list. And
yeah. Yeah. I think when, there's a lot of apprehension from buyers. Sometimes they come in and may be embarrassed that their books aren't good, or maybe they haven't done their SOPs, or they're on a downtrend. I think there's a lot of vanity with people when they come in to sell. How do you help people understand that timing? I know it seems simple to say sell right now, but what if someone is having challenges? What kind of things can Brad and Quiet Light do to really help them? Say if you look at it and they're not ready yet, but they could be ready with actionable things. A lot of people might try to list it and take their chances, but we would probably turn them away and say, do this, this, and this, and it helps them in both ways. Maybe talk about that philosophy.
Yeah, we do a lot to try to prepare for sale. So, very common for me. Someone comes to me and they say, hey, Brad, I've been in business for 18 months. I've been in 18 months. I want to sell my business. Look at this. What do you think? Well, I have over the years tried to take a business with 18 months of history and get it sold. It's been a challenge. I don't know about you. I've had a hard time getting businesses to move that are 18 months. Now, so one of two things need to happen here. If we're going to try to sell something with a really short history, then we're going to have to do something to account for that short history. That's probably going to be in the multiple. So what we try to do with folks is let them know, like, hey, this business that you have, it's got a good growth trajectory. If we had 24 months, and just to make a point to those listening, 24 months is a very important inflection point. Right. Because 24 months is the first time when we can have a month over month trend year over year. So that means where we can compare January to January, February to February, December to December, July to July. That's the first time. 24 months is the first time where someone can look at it and see what does the growth look like, and they get a year over year, month over month trend for each of those months. And so 24 months ends up being super important. In fact, I would say, like, if we had 24 months, I think that you can make a case that like anything more than 24 months is a lot of times is not even looked at that seriously by a lot of buyers. Right. They're really most interested in that recent history. So in a case where someone calls and they say, hey, I want to sell, I've got 18 months of history. My first thing is going to be, what would you think about waiting another 6 months? And I'll tell you why. And then I tell them, like, hey, for your business, it looks like if you had 24 months, it looks like it'd be a 3.5 multiple. But if we need to go right now on 18 months, I think we would need to drop the multiple down into the mid 2s to get interest, because the buyers are going to push back so hard. And so now I'm presenting them with options. I'm saying, like, hey, I've done this enough to know I can't just go put an 18-month-old business out there and say 3.5. Can't just put a multiple, slap the multiple on it and say, just deal with it, because the buyers just won't deal with it. They'll deal with it by ignoring it. So, I think that we try to lead them to where they're trying to go, but we do put people off. And I don't think we put people off necessarily. It's not necessarily to help our own schedules. It's actually to help the business have the amount of time that it needs. It's not that complicated. We can simplify the process for you. So if you're like thinking about selling, we definitely can simplify it we can help you with the books. I have people come to me all the time like, Brad, I read Joe's book. He said my books have to be on accrual. Well, okay, that's fine. Did you know I'll flip into accrual for you?
Right.
I've had 2 or 3 people tell me, oh no, I thought I needed to hire a firm to do that. No, I'll do it for you. I'll flip it to accrual for you. So you don't have to be buttoned up at all, in my opinion. You can come to us and say, I don't even have a P&L. Now, I might give you a homework project. I'm not typically building these P&Ls from scratch. I did do it for a seller in 2023. It was a extenuating circumstance. But, if you're going to build it from scratch, I'm going to give you the tools to get it done. Either a firm to do it or something where I can say, hey, you could do this yourself. You do it this way. But I do think you're right. Like the timing's not always perfect, but when people reach out, we can help you with the timing thing. You're not going to get slapped on the wrist by us. We're here to support you. We understand that running these businesses is very difficult, and selling them is pretty difficult too. Like we're trying to make a process that's painful not be so painful and be something that you can be like, hey, Quiet Light was there. They helped me. They held my hand all the way through the deal, start to finish, and I was able to move on and do my next thing.
I think you make a great point, because I've talked to so many entrepreneurs that come in, because here's kind of the way people have to look at it. If you're a listener out there thinking about selling your business, you call Brad, you're going to expect him to say, here are the steps we got to do. Here's a price. Some people are really shocked when we say, you don't want to sell right now, because that's what we do. We don't make any money consulting with people. We don't make any money doing that. We only make it selling it. So what's the motivation? And typically what I tell people the motivation is, it's about you, not us. And if we can find a way that even over a 6 or 7 month period, you can add $15,000 in income somehow in these little things, that becomes $45,000 to $55,000 on your sale. And it matters, because people don't realize how little money can jump out. So my point in saying this is sometimes I think the preparation before the sale is even more important than the sale itself. And I'd like for you to tell the listeners your philosophy of working them as people and advising them. And I know that's sort of a broad thing there, but do you see a lot of these that people are ready right when they come in, or do they need to do this preparation?
It's a mixed bag, but I would say that in most cases, we're not ready to go on day one that we talk for whatever reason. I've got a guy that reached out today. He came to me a month ago. He knows our stuff. He's been following us for a long time. He kind of understands how we do it. He wants to be SBA pre-qualified. So he wants to be SBA pre-qualified, but we need the 2023 return. So, I told him, he's like, hey, can we just go to market? Like maybe by the time it closes, we can have the return. No, we can't do that. We're going to have to, if you want to be SBA pre-qualified, and it's going to be a big sale, it's going to be a, 5 million plus sale. So, in this situation, it's worth it for him to crank out, get 2023 done. Let's stay in touch. Let's keep working on it. We'll get everything ready to go and we'll be prepared when we get there. But yeah, the managing the people part is, we have to kind of go where the people are. So, if someone comes to us and says, I just have to sell today, tell me what I need to do, then the game has changed. Most people that come to us are wanting maximum outcome.
Right.
But that's not everybody. Sometimes people have circumstances in their life going on that they're like, I just need to sell. I know it's not the best time to sell, but I just need to sell. Can you help me sell now? Now's the time for it. And so I do kind of feel like we are kind of forced to go where the people are, but we generally go from the perspective of, hey, don't you want maximum outcome? I do think, one of the things I try to do, and they probably think I'm trying to do this as like reverse psychology, but I think this is a fair exercise. When I get on the phone with somebody, I always ask them, so, hey, you got this business, you're making a lot of money on it. You got great trends. Do you enjoy running it? I do. Oh, you do? You enjoy running it? Okay. Do you think you could continue to grow it? Yes, I do. Really? So it's 2 million now. You think you can make it 4 million? I do. I think I could do the work. I think I can get it to 4 million. And you enjoy it. and I enjoy it. Well, why are we talking about selling? I've had many people tell me, well, I just thought that selling was like the next thing I'm supposed to do. And I would tell you right now, as a guy that has done a lot of operating, buying, and selling over the years, if you have a business that you enjoy operating and it is growing and you think your prospects for the future for growth are good, why would you sell that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that many people don't realize that the natural transition isn't always to sell. And sometimes in your vertical, it really depends on if you can be successful. So again, we're talking with Brad Wayland, Quiet Light Advisor here. Brad, I mean, I think that we want to wrap this up so people can kind of understand, you as an advisor. I think sometimes this is such a huge transaction. People have to choose someone they can trust and interact well with. I think you probably have a philosophy around how you run your business, much like all Quiet Light associates do. It's pretty much entrepreneur centric for me. So tell everybody a little bit more about how they can get in touch with you, what you might want them to do if they're coming in to talk to you about their business, just things that they could have that's actionable to work with Brad.
Yeah, sure. So you can email me, brad@quietlight.com. So if you're, looking for me, you want to do valuation, you want to just discuss your business, you want to talk about exit planning, want to talk about just like the psychology of how do I decide what I want to do. Happy to go through all those kinds of conversations with you. You can email me, brad@quietlight.com. And once you email me, then you've got access to my cell phone. You've got access to my email. Pretty easy to get in touch with me. If you can't find me for whatever reason, there's plenty of support queues at Quiet Light that'll lead you to me if you're looking for me. So definitely want to give you that opportunity. The other thing is there's a team of 14 of us, and not every advisor is meant to work with every seller. So generally, when you come into Quiet Light, you get assigned to an advisor, and you'll probably work with that advisor from here on out. Doesn't mean you have to. If there's somebody that you have seen information on that you really would like to work with, you can request to work with someone specifically.
Yeah.
So don't listen to this podcast and feel like you have to come work with Brad. Pat, even though he's the host of the podcast, he's also a high-powered broker. He's done a lot of deals in his time, at Quiet Light, and we already talked about some of his entrepreneurial experience. So there's lots of folks to choose from, but our door is open. And I do think that is sort of the mantra that we want to communicate to people, is that we want to hear about your business. We want to discuss how we can potentially help. And that does not mean that you only come to us if you think that we're going to end up listing your business. We can actually help you get through that thought process of, should I sell? And is now the time? What are the steps I could take? We can give you the roadmap to kind of getting from here to there. So I'm happy to help in any way. I do appreciate the opportunity to come on today and kind of talk about me and some of the ways that I, kind of look at deals.
Absolutely. And for the listeners out there, Brad is a little bit humble. He's done some of the biggest deals in Quiet Light history. When you were on the edge of the aggregator start, when things started in 2021, Brad has an enormous amount of experience, not just in M&A, but really in business. I think that's what I want the listeners to understand. If you reach out to one of the advisors at Quiet Light, we're probably going to have a conversation about how to make your business better as much as we are how to exit it. And sometimes that timing is not the exact thing. And us being through this so many times, Brad has a massive amount of experience, not only selling his companies, but after selling 50 some companies or more at Quiet Light and seeing so many verticals. So utilize that information. Make sure you're reaching out to Brad, talk with him, get your business in a potential to sell, because I can tell you right now, there's not very many guys that I know that have as many connections that Brad does to try to get your business sold. Brad, I appreciate you coming on today, man. And obviously we hope that anyone will reach out to you at that brad@quietlight.com, and I appreciate you having on the Quiet Light podcast today. Appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, Pat. I really appreciate it.